Well, hi everybody, and welcome again to my video blog. So today I've got some good news. I recently learned that I was accepted into a PhD program at a local university. So I found a supervisor and I've been accepted into the program, and I don't know yet if I'll have funding or not, but my supervisor over there told me that if I don't get government funding, he will find me funding. So I pretty much have a guaranteed place into a PhD program, which I'm very happy about. And when I go over there, I'll be doing artificial intelligence research. So today I thought I would tell you about artificial intelligence, the field of AI research in general, as well as some of my own ideas about AI research. Okay, so in the artificial intelligence field, as most of you probably know from movies, the ultimate goal is to eventually have a computer that can understand the world just as well as we do, and be able to learn and adapt to changing situations very easily, which is something that we obviously don't have now. But if you watch much sci-fi, you know, you have Data the android in Star Trek, and you have the movie AI that came out recently with, again, sentient robots. It's a recurrent theme. You know, obviously, 2001: A Space Odyssey, you have the HAL computer, which seems to be sentient, or if he's not sentient, seems to be very apt at understanding the causes of what he's doing. In a sense, he knows how to interact with the world in a way to make what he wants happen, even though he's kind of crazy. But anyways, the field of AI is probably not as young as some of you may think. It's a branch of computer science, and it's in a sense I think it deserves to be called a science because it's got theories, experiments, hypotheses, you know, predictions, just like any other science. But it was born pretty much in the 1950s. You know, some of you might think that AI is kind of recent, but you know, if you think just about 2001: A Space Odyssey, already in that movie they were talking about AI, and it's a movie from 1968. So you have to think that even back then AI was not, you know, brand new. It's an idea that's been going on for a while, to have machines that can be intelligent, and people started studying it more seriously pretty much as soon as computers appeared in the mid-1940s, and the army came around, you know, and they started realizing, well, there's some potential there. You know, if you can have some machines that are intelligent and that can reason very fast, there's some potential advantage for the army, and obviously there's some other advantages for all of society as a whole. But so far, we haven't really gotten anything near thinking AI, and many people have kind of given up on that idea. Many people now think that it's impossible that we'll ever have AI that can think like a human, because we've tried a lot and we failed so far. Every attempt has pretty much failed, and that's prompted people to say it's impossible. In my opinion, that's kind of stupid, because, you know, you have to think back to some other examples of similar happenings. You know, if you think of the Wright brothers, who designed and built the first airplane, then you know, you start to realize that before the Wright brothers, there were many other people that tried to build flying machines. You know, as soon as there was a steam engine and a gasoline engine, people tried to build big machines with wings that would flap their wings to try and take off in the sky like a bird, and all of the early attempts failed. They didn't work, and back then that prompted people to say humans will never be able to fly like birds. But in my opinion, that was kind of a stupid way to think about the problem, because there were already birds in nature that could fly at the time. So why did these people think that we would never be able to replicate something that already happens in nature, and that's obviously, you know, permitted by the laws of physics? Simply because humans tried and failed a certain number of times, in my opinion, is not really a good scientific reason to believe that we'll never be able to reach a goal. So I think it's pretty much the same thing about AI. You know, it's not because we tried and failed many times over at building sentient computers that we'll never reach that goal. Because intelligence happens in nature too. Just like flight happens in nature, we are intelligent beings. Animals are also intelligent beings, and you know, it's not unrealistic to think that we could replicate intelligence in a machine. You know, even if you're one of those people that believes that only humans have a soul, well, then maybe we'd still be able to replicate animal intelligence. Even without a soul, there could still be a thinking machine. But anyways, early on in the field of AI, there's been some pretty vibrant successes. You know, very early on, you had computers that could play games like checkers and chess, and it could reason about logical problems. You know, and people realized that there was a big potential in the field because computers are really good at calculations, and mathematical logic is all about calculations. So it's possible to build computers that can prove mathematical theorems, you know, by exhaustively searching for all the possibilities. And as computers get faster and faster, it becomes possible to make computers that can prove mathematical theorems faster and faster. And if you think of the world as a logical environment in which, you know, you can formulate every question about the world as a logical statement, then, you know, you start to think, well, maybe I could build a computer that could reason very, very fast about a ton of logical statements about the world, and that could prove mathematically whether it can do something or not. And that's the kind of logical thinking that people envisioned behind the HAL computer in 2001: A Space Odyssey. You know, he's a super logical computer. He works based on logical axioms and theorems, and he sees the world as a set of logical rules and principles. You know, and by navigating very fast in those mathematical rules and principles, he can reason about the world. Unfortunately, in that movie, we see that his logic is kind of flawed, and that it has problems. But people at the time thought that it might be possible to build computers that would be that smart one day, using only mathematical logic. And they became very enthusiastic. So in 1965 here, I have a citation from H.A. Simons, who said, "Machines will be capable within 20 years of doing any work a man can do." So 20 years after 1965 is 1985, and you can see that didn't quite pan out. But still, even after 1965, there were some other successes in the area. You have to think of systems like SHR-DLU, which was a system back then that could read commands written in simple English from a console, and you could write it commands, and it would understand them and reason. It was a robot that manipulated colored blocks in various shapes, like spheres and cones, inside a small room. And you could tell it, for example, I want you to take the small blue cone and place it on a big red block. And it would understand what you said in plain English and would do the required manipulation. Then you could tell it, I want you to place the big red block over the big blue block. And then it would parse the command and it would understand that the big red block right now is under the cone, so it has to take off the cone and then take the block and then place it over the other block. And would be able to reason perfectly about that very restricted environment. But already people saw that and they said, wow, you know, maybe soon we'll be able to have computers that can understand English in a much more complex setting and be able to do tasks in the real world and understand us. And that was very encouraging to them. And shortly after, there started to be robots like Shaky the robot, who could also understand commands about a very restricted environment. He could navigate inside rooms in a small office setting, and he could go from room to room and push blocks around, and he understood commands typed in English also from a terminal. And at the time, that was very encouraging, and of course scientists, you know, were very excited, and they thought, wow, it won't take very long for us to have computers just like in 2001: A Space Odyssey that can understand us and that can you know, control factories and stuff and react to commands said in spoken English. Because already in the 1970s there started to be work also into speech recognition. People started to see that it was feasible to have computers that could understand spoken language, and translate it into written language, so it wasn't that far of a stretch to imagine that in not so long there would be computers that could understand spoken English. But unfortunately, after this, the AI field kind of stagnated, and there was kind of what was called an AI winter, because many of the fields of AI just didn't pan out. You know, they started to promise things that seemed really out there, like having computers that can understand English and translate it into any other language, having computers that could drive cars, having computers that could power robots, that could help us in the house. And the scientists started to make it seem like that was going to happen real soon, but it wasn't happening. They weren't succeeding at getting artificial intelligence that far. And all of those failures led to basically a disappointment in the community, and the funding was reduced eventually. And as I said, many people gave up the idea of ever having sentient computers because of all those many failures. They started to think, well, it's impossible. And today, obviously we can see that computers don't fully understand speech. You know, you have programs out there that are pretty good at translating spoken speech into written language, but those programs don't really have an understanding of the language. And you know, there's some phone services out there that you can call and you can say, oh, I'd like to have the phone number for this company name, you know, and it will try to understand what you're saying, and very often it fails, and it only understands a really restricted setting. So obviously that didn't really pan out, and obviously in the 1980s people started promising that we'd have cars that would drive themselves, and we still don't have that today. Although if you are keeping up with the research in the field, you know that there's been the DARPA Grand Challenge recently, where there were competitions of robots that basically seem to drive themselves. But of course those robots are still restricted, and they're still not quite, you know, ready to drive in the real world just yet. And today most of the AI research that we have is aimed basically at doing good in a very restricted setting. For example, we have computer programs that are getting increasingly good at recognizing faces, so facial recognition, fingerprint recognition, voice recognition, and of course we have things like voice synthesis and well, basically what I talked to you about earlier, speech transcription. Those are small problems in AI that people have been working on. There's also work in robotics, but of course it's very simple. You know, things like obstacle avoidance and really basic subtasks that we're trying to develop systems that can do really good at. But there is no big research, as far as I know, into really having like a thinking computer or something broad like that, because people have mostly given up on that, and they're working on things that that they know they can improve. So we're still seeing improvements in things like facial recognition. We're getting systems that are increasingly good at it, although they still aren't perfect. They still aren't quite as good as a human being is at recognizing faces, unfortunately. So, well, I told you a little bit about the history of AI research and why it kind of failed to reach its ultimate goal yet. So now I'm going to tell you about my own take. So I asked the question, what makes us intelligent? So some people who believe in intelligent design will tell you maybe that intelligence is something God-given. But I am a scientist. I believe in natural selection and all those things. And personally, I think intelligence is just an evolutionary trick. It's an adaptation that makes us fitter. It's something that helps us survive. And I would define intelligence as basically your capacity to adapt our behavior to changing situations as efficiently as possible. Intelligence is something that helps us to understand our environment and to adapt more effectively. So bacteria, for example, they're not very smart, and if you start, you know, putting toxins in the water where they live, they will not run away. Maybe they're not even able to run away. They will just die. And the bacteria basically rely on the principle that there's really many of them, and maybe they'll be able to adapt to the toxin in their environment, or maybe there's a bunch more farther away from there that won't be affected, and they'll manage to survive somehow just by the fact that they're really numerous and they reproduce very fast. And they adapt on a genetic level. But humans and animals can have some understanding of their environment, and when there's a threat, they can run away. And sometimes they can fight that threat and adapt to it in a way that's no longer a threat. And of course our intelligence is very, very useful there. But the way I define it, if I define our intelligence as our capacity to adapt our behavior to changing situations, then you can start to think that even simple monocellular organisms that are just one cell, like bacteria, are intelligent in a sense. Because bacteria, for example, you might think they're completely stupid, but they can adapt, their gene expression dynamically. They can start producing more of a certain protein if they find that their environment is not supplying them with it. They can adapt to their environment in a way that's kind of intelligent. They don't have a brain in the sense that we think of, but they have cellular machinery in there that's capable of adaptation. And why did this adaptation come to be? Well, it came to be because of natural selection. Again, because these adaptations make the bacteria more able to survive. The more the bacteria can adapt to their environment quickly, and the more they can adapt, the more flexibility they have, the more chance they have of surviving. And in a sense, I think that our intelligence that we have is just an extension of that. And if you think of neurons in our brain, the first animals to have neurons were probably really simple creatures, like very, very primitive fish and worms have neurons inside of them, and these neurons allow them to adapt in ways that simpler animals and plants cannot. Plants cannot move, really, for the most part, and but animals can. And not only can they move, their neurons can guide them to move to areas where there's more food, for example, and that's a big advantage. It's something that plants couldn't do. And so it became an advantage, but quickly, natural selection selected animals that had more intelligence, more capability to adapt dynamically like this. And eventually, other things like vision and touch came along, and animals started to have more and more senses, and to have more and more elaborate brains that can process this information more efficiently, and again make them more adaptable, more intelligent. And this led eventually to us today. We're the animals with the biggest brains on the planet at this time, and we've succeeded so well that we've colonized pretty much almost every environment on Earth. Humans exist in almost every environment on Earth, despite the fact that, right now I live in Canada and it's winter outside, and it's probably like -10. And if I went outside naked, I probably couldn't survive. But us humans were intelligent enough that we're able to build winter coats and stuff that allows us to survive in environments that we couldn't even just develop a natural protection for. Or well, at least we could have evolved fur, but the fact is I can survive just as well in Africa as I could survive here in Canada, because I can choose to wear my winter coat or not. I'm intelligent enough to be able to adapt to these various environments in ways that simpler animals can't. So that's my take on intelligence. Intelligence is just the result of natural selection. It's something that helps us survive, and it's something that's just an extension, basically, of a more primitive intelligence that existed in very simple animals, perhaps as simple even as unicellular animals. But even today, AI scientists and biologists have studied the human brain. Of course, trying to design sentient computers, people have thought, why don't we try to replicate the human brain? And so they started studying it in detail, and people still don't fully understand the human brain. And there's many reasons for that. One of the reasons is that it's full of very complex circuits. We have literally billions of neurons in our brain, and these neurons have thousands of billions of connections in between them, and all of those connections matter. And we don't fully know how the neurons in our brains are connected. We don't fully understand, because all those connections have evolved over a very long time. We're the product of billions of years of evolution, and we don't fully know why every part of the brain works the way it does. We don't fully know how everything is connected together. So studying the human brain hasn't proven a very successful way of understanding intelligence so far. Although there has been progress, for example, in deciphering the way cells are connected in the early visual cortex. We now understand much better how we process early visual information in the back of our brain than we did before. And I think that's quite useful and interesting, but we don't understand how thinking works. We don't understand that, and it might be a very long time before we can fully understand the human brain, if ever, unfortunately. I think the only way we could understand a human brain fully is if we ever managed to develop a machine, for example, that would be able to scan the human brain so precisely that it could build a map of all the synapses and all the connections everywhere in the human brain. If we can ever develop such a powerful scanner, then we might be able to start studying the human brain more seriously and gain more understanding. But even there, understanding it fully would probably still be non-trivial. But anyways, besides the fact that it's a bunch of very complicated circuits and it's evolved over a very long time, I think the human brain is full of specialized parts. You know, for example, people have done brain scans and studies, you know, on what areas of the brain lights up when you're doing special activities, for example, and to determine, you know, there's areas that are specialized, or that seem to be specialized for speech recognition, and that there's areas that are specialized for touch, for vision, for example. And they've determined that the front of the brain seems to be the area that integrates higher level cognition and thinking and reasoning. But even there, you know, even though there's areas that are specialized, things are connected in a very intricate way. And when you present visual stimuli to somebody's brain, it's not just the back of the brain that lights up, it's a bunch of different areas. There's many things going on. And there's some areas that can be used for processing music that can also be lit up when language comes up, and maybe when some visual patterns come up, it also lights up the same areas. And those studies of the brain have just shown us, you know, just how complex the brain is. Although they still help us gain some understanding. And of course, people have also been able to gain some understanding from wounds that people have had. When somebody gets wounded in a certain area of their brain and it changes their personality, for example, or it makes them unable to perceive, for example, musical pitch, or things like that, when we can say, oh, you can't perceive musical pitch anymore, but you could before, or you can't recognize people's faces anymore, then maybe this area of your brain that got damaged was involved somehow in recognizing faces. And over the years there's been accumulated evidence of that. But anyway, so why am I talking about the human brain? Well, because the human brain, in a sense, is what we're trying to replicate in artificial intelligence. We'd like to have computers that can be just as good as us humans that are understanding our world, because someday we'd like to have robots that can do the dishes and clean our house and stuff. And we'd also like to have computers that can understand what we tell them. And those are things that so far only humans seem to be able to do. And in a sense, the idea that we'd like to imitate the human brain seems like a very logical proposal. It seems like a logical step. It's something that only we can do, so we should try to understand ourselves, we should try to understand our own brain, and try to put our own capacities in a machine. But so far that hasn't really been successful. But personally, I believe that it might be possible to produce intelligence in the same way that natural selection did. Because as some of you may know, it's possible to simulate natural selection, for example, inside of a computer program. There's this little sub-branch of AI called genetic algorithms that focuses basically on applying natural selection on virtual entities inside of a computer. For example, you can evolve better jet engines basically by creating various virtual jet engines inside of a computer program and tweaking parameters of them. For example, if I want to know if it's more effective for my jet engine to have a wider exhaust, for example, then I can simulate multiple jet engines with multiple exhaust sizes, and I can select the one with the best exhaust size and use that one, for example. But what if I wanted to determine which kind of jet engine exhaust shape is more effective? and I don't really know to begin with. I don't really have any idea. And maybe I could generate a computer program that will simulate a bunch of jet exhausts, and it will constantly vary the shape. It will generate, say, 1,000 virtual jet engines with many different exhaust shapes. Then it will simulate all of those, and it will pick the best variants inside of this small population, and then it will try to combine those different variants together. It will take two of them and try to combine them together into an offspring. Basically, what it's doing is reproducing those jet engine exhausts together to create a child that would combine both. So basically you're having kind of like sexual reproduction inside of a computer program. And then once you've replaced your initial population with virtual offspring, you can begin the process again of evaluating them all inside of a simulation, and then you take the best possible jet engine exhaust shapes again, and you begin this crossover combination process again for your next generation. Basically what you're doing is you're simulating natural selection of jet engine exhausts inside of a computer program using simulations, and you're actually learning to create better jet engine exhausts based on this. And it might seem like a wacky idea, but it really works. You can simulate natural selection inside of a computer program using simulation, and you can apply this to a bunch of tasks. There's many engineering tasks that can benefit from this. I've read a paper recently about using genetic algorithms to evolve better electronic circuits to perform frequency filtering, for example. So instead of designing those circuits by hand, you can have a computer program evolve those circuits for you. And again, that can be very useful. But why would it be useful for AI? Well, possibly you can use genetic algorithms to evolve virtual brains for robots. And that might seem crazy, but you can evolve virtual animals inside of a computer program. Virtual animals that have some kind of intelligence. And you can control the shape and the size and the connections inside of a virtual neural network brain, for example. And you can use that to try to evolve intelligence inside of a computer program. And this is not crazy, impossible stuff I'm talking about. It's already been done. There's a program out there called Polyworld that basically does this for very simple insect-like creatures. But these insects, for example, can evolve enough to be able to, like, for example, find their food and find mates to reproduce with in a virtual 2D environment that's really simple. But like, they can learn to do all of those things. And myself, I have created a simple program in which I have virtual insects that are created with a completely random brain to begin with. But eventually, because of evolutionary pressure, they begin to develop intelligent behavior. And after a couple thousand generations, the only insects that survive are the ones that are able to find food more efficiently and things like that. Again, in a simulated virtual environment. And so far, people haven't really given much thought to this kind of artificial life approach, because it's only been applied to really simple environments. For example, I can simulate insects in a very small, simple computer program, and they can develop behavior like finding their food in a simple 2D world that's basically a grid where you can only move left, right, front and back, and turn around. And that's not really useful for the robotics community. It's too simple, it's too primitive. We can already do that in much more efficient ways, and people don't really give that much credit. And the reason it's so simple so far is because natural selection in the real world takes billions of years. So if you simulate natural selection inside of a computer program, it's going to take a very long time to evolve unless you really restrict the domain to something extremely simple. So far, it hasn't really given us real intelligence on the human level. But still, I personally think it's very interesting, because natural selection is the way in which our intelligence came to be. And we can replicate natural selection inside of a computer program. And so far it's restricted because computers are restricted in the amount of power they have. But computers are always becoming faster. So it becomes possible to simulate environments that are more and more like the real world. And if we can simulate an environment like the real world, and we can start evolving more complex virtual robots in this world, And possibly we can evolve virtual robots that would be able to navigate a world that would become very close to the real world eventually. And if those robots can navigate this virtual world that's so close to the real world, it's such an accurate simulation, then eventually you could take one of those virtual robots and put its virtual brain into a real computer inside of a real robot in the real world, and this real robot could be just as smart as your virtual robot and just as adaptable. And that would be interesting, because if we can create intelligence on a level that's anywhere close to the human level inside of this kind of simulation, then we can have it in the real world just as well. The problem, of course, as I just said again, is it takes too much time. The more complicated your virtual brain is, the longer it takes to evolve. But I think that there might be ways to speed up this evolution process by encoding the structure of those virtual brains better, and perhaps doing it in a modular way, that is, evolving separate parts of this brain separately for different tasks and combining them together, and eventually evolving more advanced reasoning on top of that. So I think that maybe this is the future of AI. If we really want to have a computer that can think, maybe we need to go with the natural selection way instead of the intelligent design way. Because so far what people have tried to do is to design a computer that can think like a human, but all those intelligent design approaches have failed because humans don't really understand the way humans think. You know, if you sit down and you think about, how do I think? What makes me intelligent? What makes me able to reason about the world? And you try to think about it for a long time, you probably won't get very far. People have tried doing that a lot, and we still don't fully understand the way we think. We don't understand the way thoughts come up in our mind. We don't really understand the way we combine these thoughts together. We don't understand the structures that are inside of our brain. You know, we reason, we think, but we haven't evolved to understand our own brain. Like, just a baby that's born will have instincts to eat, but he won't understand that there's a digestive system inside of him. You know, he just understands that he needs to eat, and at some point he needs to poop. He doesn't understand that he's eating to absorb energy. And just in the same way, we think because we need to think in order to adapt and to survive, but we don't really understand what goes on inside the machinery in our brain. We're not really good at doing that because we haven't evolved for that. We haven't evolved the need for that. So these approaches have failed, and I think that perhaps the natural selection way is the way to go. Perhaps we need to look more into how to evolve computers that can adapt to their environments. Very simple environments at first, but that become increasingly popular. And for my PhD thesis, I'd like to maybe look at ways to evolve computers that can evolve computer programs that can understand visual information better. For example, evolving computers that can understand what goes on when people are manipulating objects in the scene, or perhaps evolving a robot that can manipulate objects in a simulated world that resembles the real world, and it has limbs and can grab the objects and move them as needed to perform simple tasks, like washing the dishes, for example, in a simulated world. And I have some ideas on how to do that, how to take this natural selection process beyond simulated insects. And that's what I'd like to work on. I don't know if my supervisor will be interested in working on that, but I'll try to convince him, and I'll try to at least bring some of my own ideas into this research, and hopefully it'll be interesting. I don't know if we're really ever gonna get close to a human level of intelligence. I don't know if it's going to happen in this century, but well, I think it will happen eventually. I think that eventually, if our technology keeps progressing, if we get computers that are always faster, if we keep trying, we'll eventually develop a computer that's intelligent, you know. And in a sense, even if we don't use this natural selection approach, we already have systems that can recognize faces really efficiently. We already have systems that can reason logically. We already have systems that can do some level of voice understandings, and those things are only going to get better. And if those things just keep getting better, then at some point somebody will be able to put them together to create a robot that has enough intelligence to navigate the world in a way that's useful, to help people around the house, for example. I don't know if it will be as intelligent as a person, or if it will understand you, or if it will have emotions, but it's possible. But anyways, I didn't really talk about emotions in this video blog, but I think emotions are just basically components of our intelligence. You know, people sometimes think that emotions are completely separate from intelligence, but in my opinion, emotions are just markers, instinctive markers that give us information about our state, or that try to motivate some behaviors. For example, when you feel angry at someone because someone's attacking you, it's just your instincts telling you you should probably defend yourself right now. You know, you should probably protect yourself, because that's the instinctive behavior that's going to be best for your survival. When you fall in love with someone, it's again your instincts that are telling you maybe you have to consider this person as a possible mate, you know, because having sex and reproducing is good for the species. So, you know, people put a lot of mystery around emotions. They don't really want them to be scientifically understandable, I think, because people like to think that emotions are really mysterious and stuff, but are they really so mysterious? Aren't they just part of our evolutionary process and all that? And I'm not saying that to make you feel bad, you know. I'm not saying that emotions aren't important. I'm not saying that emotions aren't to be enjoyed. You know, I enjoy having emotions. I enjoy eating a good meal. I enjoy going and watching movies, and I'm going to keep enjoying those things for as long as I can. And I don't think that understanding our intelligence makes our intelligence any less wonderful. In fact, I think that it's really amazing that from just unicellular organisms, people like us came to be, and that there's so many animals in nature that have developed so many interesting strategies to survive in the world. And I think that nature is really impressive and wonderful. And the study of intelligence, I think, is also very interesting, because in the end it can help us understand ourselves, and it can help us build computers that can be much more useful than they are now. Because right now, computers are just a tool for us to access and manipulate information, but maybe in the future, computers will take an increasingly active part in manipulating that information for us. And already they are. You know, already systems like Facebook have features that are kind of like AI-ish. You know, when Facebook comes up and says, you might know this person, do you want to add them? You know, it's kind of AI at work. It's graph theory that's analyzing the social connections between you and your friends, and that's saying, oh, your friend seems to know these people, all of your friends seem to know these people, so maybe you know them too. So in a sense, it's already like primitive AI at work. And sometime in the future, maybe when you go on Google, you won't have any more to just type queries and say, oh, I want to find a red sweater with this kind of pattern on it, you know, and type red sweater with swirly pattern or whatever. Maybe you'll just be able to talk to Google or talk to your search engine or your computer and tell it, you know, this is what I want, this is what I want it to look like, and it'll show you examples, and you'll tell it, no, that's not exactly what I want it to be more like this. Anyways, I think if we ever develop computers that are nearly as intelligent as us, it'll be wonderful for mankind. And of course, some people are worried that computers will take over the world someday. I don't think that's going to be a problem, but I suppose I could do another video blog about why I don't think that's going to be a problem. But anyways, that's all for this video blog. I hope you find it interesting, and if you find it confusing what I said, then you can feel free to ask questions, and you can also feel free to make a video response again. Yeah. My next video blog will most likely be about something transition related, for those of you who don't like me talking about other stuff. Okay, so that's it for today, and I'm really happy about having a place into a PhD program. You know, I'm going to be able to reach my goal, and I'm going to be able to become a doctor, and that's really cool to me to be able to keep going into the research world. Okay, so goodbye people, have a nice day.